So how is it possible for three nations with completely different origin stories? I mean, we're talking about an ancient kingdom, a revolutionary republic, and a resilient survivor to end up as close allies. Well, today, we're going to explore the unique historical rhythms of the United Kingdom, the United States, and Romania to figure that out. The key thing to get right off the bat is that history isn't some single, neat timeline that everyone follows. It's way more like a collection of different songs playing at different tempos. Some nations, like the UK, have this slow, steady beat of evolution. Others, like the US, are born from a sudden, loud revolution. And then you have some, like Romania, whose history is all about surviving wave after wave of challenges. These different paths, they forge completely different national characters. All right, first up, the UK. Let's call them the Old Guard. Their story isn't about one big, dramatic founding moment. No, it's about centuries of gradual, steady change. It's a history of continuity where institutions kind of grow over time instead of being designed from scratch all at once. Now, in total contrast, you have the US, the pioneer. This story is the exact opposite. It's about a radical break from the past. It was a deliberate, conscious experiment in building a nation not on ancient traditions, but on these big, abstract ideals like liberty and self-governance. And finally, our third story, Romania, the survivor. Its whole history has been shaped by its tough neighborhood, literally squeezed between massive, powerful empires. For centuries, the main struggle wasn't about building their own empire, but just holding on, preserving their unique Latin-based language and their culture against absolutely overwhelming odds. So let's go back and really dig into how these national identities were first put together. As you'll see, it really came down to those three very different paths: evolution, invention, and just plain survival. And wow, this timeline really shows you the massive difference in their starting blocks. The UK's modern political identity starts to form way, way back in 1066. The US, well, it's born in the modern era, 1776. And the unified state of Romania, it's even younger, coming together in 1859. I mean, they're starting from completely different worlds, historically speaking. This difference in how they're governed is just fundamental. The UK system is like an old forest. It grew organically over hundreds of years. The Magna Carta back in 1215 wasn't a finished product. It was just one early root of what would eventually become Parliament. The US, on the other hand, sat down and designed its government in 1787, writing it all down in a single blueprint, the Constitution. It was a totally deliberate act of political invention. Meanwhile, while all this was happening, the big issue for Romanians wasn't debating the finer points of government. Nope, it was a centuries-long fight just to keep their Daco-Roman language and Orthodox faith alive while being crushed between the Ottoman, Habsburg, and Russian empires. The key point here is that their main battle was for cultural existence, not political philosophy. Okay, let's jump forward to the 19th century. This was a period of massive growth for all three nations. But as we're about to see, their ideas of expansion could not have been more different. For the UK, as an island, expansion had to be global. They built this huge maritime empire that stretched across the planet, becoming the workshop of the world. The US, on the other hand, was protected by two giant oceans, so it looked inward, pushing west across its own continent under this idea of manifest destiny. It's the same concept, expansion, but driven by totally different geographies. And Romania's version of expansion? Well, it was different yet again. It wasn't about conquering other people, it was about uniting its own people. The small union in 1859, winning full independence in 1877, these were all steps toward one big goal: gathering all the Romanian-speaking lands into a single sovereign country. Then came the 20th century, and it basically threw a giant wrench into everything. The World Wars and the Cold War that followed, they were a brutal test that sent these three nations down dramatically different, divergent paths. The World Wars completely reshuffled the deck. The UK won, sure, but it was financially drained, and it was the beginning of the end for its empire. The US, though, came out as the undisputed, dominant economic and military power in the world. And Romania, what a roller coaster. It achieved its dream of a greater Romania after World War I, only to face a tragic, incredibly complex path in World War II. And right after the wars, that divergence became a chasm. The US and the UK formed the backbone of NATO, the Western military alliance. But Romania, it was forcibly pulled into the Soviet bloc. The result was the Iron Curtain, a real ideological wall that separated them for more than 40 years. And we have to be clear, this wasn't just some political alignment on a map. This was a harsh daily reality. While the West was having a post-war economic boom, Romania was suffering under one of the most brutal communist dictatorships in the Eastern Bloc. It was completely isolated from the very nations that would one day become its closest allies. But history, is just full of dramatic turns. After being separated for decades, the end of the 20th century saw this stunning, amazing convergence as the paths of these three nations finally started to line up again. The whole thing really hinges on this one single number, 1989. The Romanian Revolution was violent, it was heroic, and it finally ended decades of tyranny, setting the country on a brand new course back toward the democratic West. And in the years that followed, that convergence became official. Romania joined NATO, then the European Union. It went from being an adversary on the other side of the Iron Curtain to a crucial strategic partner for the US and UK on NATO's eastern flank. It is just a remarkable ending for three such incredibly different journeys. This summary really just puts it all side by side so clearly. You can see the huge contrast in every single row: an ancient state versus a modern one, a colonial empire versus no empire at all, a long history of political stability versus a history where that was much, much harder to find. Each column really tells the unique story we've just walked through. So when you boil it all down, these three very different histories give us three different kinds of wisdom. The UK's story, it teaches us about the power of continuity. The US really embodies the power of innovation, of a big revolutionary idea. And Romania's history, it's just this powerful, incredible lesson in resilience and cultural survival. And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. As we all face the challenges of this century, which one of these forces, the stability that comes from tradition, the disruption of brand new innovation, or just the sheer strength of resilience, which one will turn out to be the most important? It's something to chew on. Thanks for joining us.